My name is Anthony, and I'm about to tell you a story that will chill you to your very core. A tale of horror and survival that unfolded in the seemingly innocent streets of Orlando, Florida. I was just an ordinary 30-year-old man, living an unremarkable life until that fateful night when everything changed. The night I encountered the Werewolf of Orlando. It was a balmy evening in late October. The air was thick with humidity, and the scent of approaching rain hung heavy in the atmosphere. I had just finished a late shift at the local tech startup where I worked as a software developer. Exhausted but restless, I decided to take a detour through one of Orlando's many parks on my way home. Little did I know this simple decision would plunge me into a nightmare beyond my wildest imagination. As I strolled along the dimly lit path, the distant rumble of thunder echoed through the night. The park was eerily quiet, save for the occasional rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. I should have known better than to be out alone so late, but I had always felt safe in this city. That false sense of security would soon be shattered. The first sign that something was amiss came in the form of an unnatural silence. The chirping of crickets and the calls of night birds suddenly ceased, as if nature itself was holding its breath in anticipation of something terrible. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and a chill ran down my spine despite the warm night air. That's when I heard it, a low, guttural growl that seemed to emanate from the very shadows themselves. My heart began to race as I scanned the darkness, searching for the source of that inhuman sound. For a moment, I convinced myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me, a result of too many late nights and too much caffeine. But then I saw them, two glowing yellow eyes peering at me from the undergrowth. They were unlike anything I had ever seen before, filled with a primal hunger that sent waves of terror coursing through my body. I stood frozen, unable to move, as the creature slowly emerged from its hiding place. What I saw defied all logic and reason. It was massive, easily 7 feet tall when standing on its hind legs. Its body was covered in thick, matted fur that seemed to absorb the meager light around it. But it was the face that truly horrified me. A grotesque mixture of human and wolf features, with a elongated snout filled with razor-sharp teeth and ears that twitched and swiveled, catching every sound. In that moment, I knew I was face to face with a werewolf. The rational part of my mind screamed that this was impossible, that such creatures existed only in movies and folklore. But the primal part of my brain, the part hardwired for survival, knew the truth. This was real and I was in mortal danger. The werewolf's muscles tensed and I knew it was about to pounce. In that split second, my paralysis broke and I turned to run. I had never been much of an athlete, but terror lent wings to my feet as I sprinted down the path, my lungs burning and my heart threatening to burst from my chest. Behind me, I could hear the creature's pounding footsteps and its ragged breathing. The sound spurred me on, pushing me to run faster than I ever had before. I darted between trees, leaped over benches, and zigzagged through the park, desperately trying to lose my pursuer. But the werewolf was relentless. No matter how fast I ran or how many turns I took, I could feel its hot breath on the back of my neck. Its howls echoed through the night, a sound of pure savagery that seemed to freeze the blood in my veins. As I burst out of the park and onto the city streets, I dared to hope that I might find safety among the buildings and cars. Surely in the heart of Orlando, someone would see my plight and come to my aid. But the streets were deserted, the windows of homes and businesses dark and lifeless. I ran down the middle of the road, screaming for help, but my cries seemed to be swallowed by the night. The werewolf was gaining on me, its claws scraping against the asphalt as it loped along on all fours. I could smell its rank, animal odor, a mixture of wet fur and something metallic that I feared might be blood. In my panic, I took a wrong turn and found myself in a dead-end alley. My heart sank as I realized my terrible mistake. I turned to face my pursuer, my back pressed against the cold brick wall. The werewolf slowed its approach, almost seeming to savor the moment. Its yellow eyes gleamed with malicious intelligence, and its lips pulled back in a horrifying parody of a smile, revealing rows of dagger-like teeth. As it drew closer, I could see the details of its monstrous form more clearly. Its hands were a disturbing blend of human and animal, with elongated fingers tipped with cruel, curved claws. Saliva dripped from his jaws, and I could see chunks of what looked horribly like human flesh caught between its teeth. The creature reared up on its hind legs, towering over me. I closed my eyes, certain that my last moments had come. I thought of my family, my friends, all the things I had left undone in my life. I waited for the searing pain of those terrible claws tearing into my flesh, but the attack never came. Instead, I heard a sharp whistle and the sudden yelp of the werewolf. My eyes flew open to see a figure standing at the entrance of the alley, brandishing what looked like a silver sword. The werewolf had retreated a few steps, eyeing the newcomer warily. "Run!" the figure shouted at me. "Get to safety!" I didn't need to be told twice. As the werewolf's attention was divided, I bolted past it, feeling the rush of air as its claws narrowly missed my back. I ran out of the alley and down the street, not daring to look back. The sounds of combat echoed behind me, growls, the clash of metal, and human shouts of exertion. I ran until my legs gave out, collapsing on the steps of a church several blocks away. My whole body shook with exhaustion and residual terror. As I sat there gasping for breath, I tried to make sense of what had just happened. A werewolf in Orlando? A mysterious sword-wielding savior? It all seemed too fantastic to be real. But I knew what I had seen. The memory of those yellow eyes and savage teeth was burned into my mind. As my breathing slowly returned to normal, I realized that my world had changed forever. The veil of normalcy had been torn away, revealing a darker, more dangerous reality lurking just beneath the surface. I managed to make it home that night, locking every door and window and huddling in my bedroom with the lights on. Sleep was impossible. Every sound made me jump, convinced that the werewolf had somehow found me again. As the first rays of dawn began to creep through my window, I made a decision. I couldn't just go back to my normal life and pretend this hadn't happened. I needed answers. Who was my mysterious savior? Were there more werewolves out there? And most importantly, how could I protect myself and others from this hidden threat? Little did I know this was just the beginning of my journey into the supernatural underbelly of Orlando. In the days and weeks that followed, I would uncover a world of ancient curses, secret societies, and monsters that defied explanation. My ordinary life was over, replaced by a constant struggle for survival and a quest for the truth. But that night in the park, face to face with the Werewolf of Orlando, was where it all began. It was the night I learned that the darkness holds secrets, and sometimes those secrets have teeth. As I sit here now, recounting this tale, I can't help but glance nervously at the window. The sun is setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. It's beautiful, but I can't appreciate it anymore, because I know what comes with the night. I know what's out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the unwary. So let my story be a warning to you. The next time you're walking alone at night and you hear an odd sound or see a strange shadow, don't dismiss it. Don't tell yourself it's just your imagination. Because in this world of ours, there are things that defy explanation. Things with claws and fangs and an insatiable hunger. And sometimes those things come to Orlando. In the days following my terrifying encounter with the werewolf, I found myself unable to return to my normal life. Every shadow seemed to hide a potential threat, and the setting sun filled me with a dread I had never known before. I called in sick to work, unable to face the outside world, and spent my time researching werewolf lore online. Most of what I found seemed like pure fantasy, but after what I had seen, I was willing to believe almost anything. It was on the third day of my self-imposed isolation that I heard a knock at my apartment door. My heart leaped into my throat, and for a wild moment, I imagined the werewolf had somehow tracked me down. But when I peered through the peephole, I saw a woman I didn't recognize. She was in her mid-40s with streaks of gray in her dark hair and a face that spoke of both kindness and hardship. Against my better judgment, I opened the door a crack, the chain still in place. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. The woman's eyes met mine, and I saw a flicker of understanding in them. "My name is Elena," she said softly, "and I believe we need to talk, Anthony. About what you saw in the park." My blood ran cold. How did this stranger know my name? How did she know about the werewolf? But something in her manner, a sense of shared experience perhaps, made me unlatch the chain and let her in. Elena settled herself on my couch, her posture straight and alert. "I know you have questions," she began, "and I'm here to provide some answers. But first, I need you to understand that by letting you into this world, I'm putting both of us at risk. Are you sure you want to know the truth?" I nodded without hesitation. There was no going back to blissful ignorance now. "Tell me everything," I said. And so Elena began to unfold a tale that was both fantastic and terrifying. She spoke of an ancient curse that had followed certain bloodlines for centuries, of people who transformed into savage beasts under the light of the full moon. But more than that, she spoke of a secret war that had been raging in the shadows of human society for generations. "The werewolf you encountered," Elena explained, "is part of a pack that has recently moved into Orlando. They're led by a particularly vicious alpha named Fenris, who believes that werewolves should rule over humans openly rather than hiding in the shadows." "But why Orlando?" I asked, struggling to reconcile this hidden world with the city I thought I knew. Elena's expression darkened. "Orlando is a city of transients and tourists. People come and go all the time. It's easy for disappearances to go unnoticed or be explained away. Plus, the abundance of parks and wooded areas provides perfect hunting grounds." The casual way she spoke of hunting sent a shiver down my spine. I thought of all the missing persons reports I'd seen on the local news over the years, never imagining the horrific truth behind them. "So what do we do?" I asked, surprised by my use of "we." But I knew deep down that I was already committed to this fight. I couldn't stand by and let innocent people fall prey to these monsters. Elena smiled, but it was a grim expression. "We fight back. There's a network of hunters and other gifted individuals who work to keep the supernatural world in check. I'm one of them. And now, whether you like it or not, you're involved too." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small wooden box. Opening it, she revealed a silver pendant in the shape of a wolf's head. "This is infused with wolfsbane and blessed silver," she explained. "It won't stop a werewolf, but it will slow one down and cause it pain. Never take it off." As I fastened the pendant around my neck, I felt the weight of my new reality settling onto my shoulders. "What's our next move?" I asked, trying to sound braver than I felt. "We prepare," Elena said firmly. "The next full moon is in 2 weeks. That's when Fenris and his pack will be at their strongest, and when they're most likely to make a big move. We need to be ready." And so began my crash course in monster hunting. Elena introduced me to a hidden network of individuals dedicated to protecting the unsuspecting public from supernatural threats. There was Michael, a grizzled ex-Marine who specialized in weapons that could harm werewolves. Sarah, a soft-spoken librarian with an encyclopedic knowledge of folklore and mythology. And Diego, a young man with a quick wit and quicker reflexes, who had lost his sister to a werewolf attack and had dedicated his life to vengeance. Over the next 2 weeks, I learned more than I ever thought possible. How to recognize the signs of werewolf activity, the most effective ways to wound or kill a werewolf, the politics and power struggles within werewolf packs. It was a lot to take in, and there were moments when I felt overwhelmed by it all. But the memory of those yellow eyes in the park and the thought of innocent people falling victim to these creatures kept me going. As the full moon approached, tension within our group mounted. Elena's sources reported increased werewolf activity throughout the city. People were going missing at an alarming rate, and there were whispers of a big hunt planned for the night of the full moon. The night before the full moon, we gathered in an abandoned warehouse that served as our base of operations. The air was thick with anticipation and fear. Elena laid out a map of Orlando on a makeshift table, marking the areas where werewolf activity had been highest. "We believe Fenris is planning something big," she said, her finger tracing a circle around Lake Eola Park. "A mass attack right in the heart of downtown. He wants to create chaos, to reveal the existence of werewolves to the world at large." "But why?" I asked, still struggling to understand the motivations of these creatures. "Wouldn't exposing themselves put them at risk?" Diego, cleaning a silver-bladed knife nearby, snorted. "Fenris is a true believer. He thinks werewolves are superior to humans in every way. In his mind, exposure is the first step to domination." Elena nodded grimly. "Our job is to stop this attack before it can begin. We'll split into teams, cover the likely entry points to the park. Remember your training, stick to the plan, and above all, watch each other's backs. As we prepared our weapons and equipment, I caught sight of my reflection in a dusty window. I hardly recognized myself. Gone was the soft-bodied software developer, replaced by someone leaner, harder. My eyes held a haunted look that I suspected would never fully go away. I thought of my old life, of the family and friends I had distanced myself from for their own protection. For a moment, I allowed myself to mourn for the person I used to be, but then I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Sarah, her kind eyes full of understanding. "It's okay to be scared," she said softly. "We all are. But what we're doing here, it matters. We're saving lives." I nodded, squaring my shoulders. She was right. There was no going back, only forward. And if going forward meant facing down a pack of bloodthirsty werewolves, then so be it. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the city, we moved out. I was paired with Diego, tasked with covering the western approach to Lake Eola. As we made our way through the darkening streets, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. "Stay sharp," Diego muttered, his eyes constantly scanning our surroundings. "They'll be out in force tonight." We had just reached the edge of the park when we heard it, a long, mournful howl that seemed to shake the very air around us. It was answered by another, then another, until the night was filled with a chorus of inhuman voices. Diego's face went pale. "There's too many," he whispered. "They must have called in reinforcements from other packs." Before I could respond, a dark shape burst from the bushes to our right. Diego reacted with lightning speed, his silver knife flashing in the moonlight. The werewolf, a smaller one, possibly a newly turned member of the pack, let out a yelp of pain as the blade sliced across its muzzle. But it wasn't alone. More shapes emerged from the darkness, eyes glowing with feral hunger. We were surrounded. "Run!" Diego shouted, already turning to sprint towards the more open area of the park. I didn't need to be told twice, my feet pounding the pavement as I ran for my life. The sounds of pursuit filled my ears, the heavy breathing of the werewolves, the scratch of claws on concrete, the occasional pained yelp as one of our silver weapons found its mark. But there were too many of them, and they were faster than us. As we burst into the open area around Lake Eola, I saw that we weren't the only ones in trouble. The other teams were engaged in desperate battles all around the park. The night air was filled with the sounds of combat, gunshots, howls of pain and rage, and all too human screams. I saw Elena locked in combat with a massive werewolf that could only be Fenris himself. She was a blur of motion, her silver sword flashing as she parried the alpha's savage attacks. But even from a distance, I could see that she was tiring. A weight slammed into my back, sending me sprawling to the ground. Hot breath washed over my neck as powerful jaws snapped shut inches from my throat. I rolled, desperately trying to bring my weapon to bear, but the werewolf was too strong, too fast. As those terrible teeth descended towards my face, I had a moment of perfect clarity. I saw the moon reflected in the werewolf's eyes, full and bright above us. I saw the chaos unfolding around the park, hunters and werewolves locked in mortal combat. And I saw, with a certainty that surprised me, that this was where I was meant to be. I wasn't just fighting for my own survival anymore. I was fighting for every person in Orlando who had no idea of the danger that stalked their streets. I was fighting for the memory of every victim who had fallen prey to these monsters. I was fighting for a world where the darkness didn't win. With a surge of strength I didn't know I possessed, I brought my silver-infused knife up and plunged it into the werewolf's chest. The creature's eyes widened in shock and pain, a very human expression of surprise crossing its monstrous features before it collapsed on top of me. I pushed the heavy body off, gasping for air. Diego was at my side in an instant, helping me to my feet. "Nice work," he said, a note of respect in his voice. "But this isn't over yet." He was right. All around us, the battle raged on. Fenris had Elena on the defensive now, her sword strokes becoming slower as exhaustion set in. Other werewolves were breaking through our lines, heading towards the populated areas of downtown. "We need to end this," I said, surprising myself with the steel in my voice. "We need to take out Fenris." Diego nodded grimly. "Easier said than done, but you're right. Cut off the head and the body dies. You up for a suicide mission? I looked at the silver knife in my hand, still dripping with werewolf blood. I thought of my old life, of the person I used to be, and I knew without a doubt what I had to do. Let's do it, I said. We moved through the chaos of the battlefield, dodging snapping jaws and slashing claws. Other hunters saw what we were doing and moved to support us, creating a path through the melee. As we approached Fenris and Elena, I could see that the hunter was on her last legs. Her sword arm was bleeding heavily, and her movements were becoming sluggish. Fenris, by contrast, seemed to be growing stronger, feeding off the chaos and bloodshed around him. "Hey, ugly!" Diego shouted, drawing the alpha's attention. "Why don't you pick on someone your own size?" Fenris turned, his massive form towering over us. Up close, he was even more terrifying than I had imagined. His fur was a patchwork of scars, testament to countless battles. His eyes gleamed with a malevolent intelligence that was far more frightening than mere animal savagery. "Ah, the new blood," Fenris growled, his voice a rumbling bass that seemed to vibrate in my chest. "Come to die with the old guard?" "We've come to stop you," I said, surprised by how steady my voice was. "This ends tonight." Fenris threw back his head and laughed, a sound that was equal parts human amusement and bestial snarl. "Brave words, little man, but you have no idea what you're dealing with. I am power incarnate. I am the future of both our races." He lunged forward with shocking speed, his claws raking the air where my head had been a moment before. Diego and I separated, trying to flank the massive werewolf. But Fenris was too fast, too strong. He batted Diego aside like a rag doll, sending him crashing into a nearby tree. I slashed with my knife, managing to open a shallow cut along Fenris's flank. The alpha roared in pain and fury, rounding on me with murder in his eyes. "You'll pay for that with your life," he snarled. What followed was a desperate dance of survival. I dodged and weaved, using every trick Elena had taught me to stay just out of Fenris's reach. But I knew I couldn't keep it up forever. The alpha was too strong, too experienced. It was only a matter of time before he wore me down. As I felt my strength beginning to flag, I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. Elena, battered but unbowed, was struggling to her feet. Our eyes met, and a moment of understanding passed between us. I feinted to the left, drawing Fenris's attention. The alpha took the bait, lunging forward with his full strength, but instead of dodging, I dropped to the ground and rolled. Fenris's momentum carried him forward, right into the path of Elena's silver sword. The blade plunged deep into the alpha's chest, emerging from his back in a spray of dark blood. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. Fenris looked down at the sword protruding from his chest with an expression of almost comical surprise. Then he toppled backwards, his massive form crashing to the ground with earth-shaking force. A silence fell over the battlefield, broken only by the labored breathing of the combatants. The other werewolves, seeing their leader fall, began to retreat. Some fled into the night, while others simply collapsed, the fight gone out of them. As the adrenaline of battle faded, I became aware of my own injuries. Cuts, bruises, and what felt like at least one cracked rib. But I was alive. We had won. Elena limped over to me, her face pale with blood loss but her eyes shining with fierce pride. "It's over," she said softly. "We did it." I nodded, too exhausted for words. Around us, the other hunters were securing the area, tending to the wounded, and making sure no werewolves escaped into the city. The night's events would be explained away as a gang fight or some other mundane violence. The people of Orlando would never know how close they had come to having their world turned upside down. As the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, I found myself standing by the edge of Lake Eola. The water was calm, reflecting the fading stars and the slowly brightening sky. It was beautiful, peaceful in a way that seemed almost obscene after the violence of the night. Diego joined me, his arm in a makeshift sling. "Hell of a night," he said, his voice rough with exhaustion. I nodded, still struggling to process everything that had happened. "What happens now?" I asked. Diego shrugged his good shoulder. "We clean up, we heal, and we get ready for the next threat, because there's always a next threat." I thought about my old life, about the job and the friends and the simple pleasures I had left behind. For a moment, I felt a pang of longing for that simpler existence. But then I looked at Diego, at Elena, and the other hunters who had risked everything to keep the darkness at bay, and I knew there was no going back. "I'm in," I said simply. Diego clapped me on the shoulder, a grin spreading across his battered face. "Welcome to the team, rookie. Get some rest. Training starts tomorrow." As I watched the sun rise over Orlando, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Exhaustion, fear, exhilaration, and a deep sense of purpose that I had never known before. The city was waking up, its inhabitants blissfully unaware of the battle that had been fought on their behalf. And that, I realized, was the point. We fought so that others didn't have to. We faced the darkness so that others could live in the light. The Werewolf of Orlando had been defeated, but I knew this was just the beginning. There would be other monsters, other battles. But for now, in this moment between night and day, I allowed myself to feel the simple joy of survival and the pride of knowing that I had made a difference. As I turned away from the lake and followed Diego back to our makeshift base, I cast one last look at the city skyline. Orlando would never look the same to me again, but that was okay. I had found my place in this hidden world, and I was ready for whatever came next. The war against the darkness would go on, and I would be there, standing on the front lines, ready to face whatever horrors the night might bring. Because now I knew the truth. Monsters were real, but so were monster hunters. And as long as there were people willing to stand against the darkness, there was hope. The sun climbed higher in the sky, chasing away the last shadows of night. And with it came the promise of a new day and new battles to be fought. The Werewolf of Orlando was gone, but the fight for Orlando, for all of humanity, would continue. And I would be there, silver knife in hand, ready to face whatever came next.